Really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and also co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Abi Amankona. Right, so before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's foreign minister is accusing Russia of carrying out what he's calling a deliberate massacre in the town of Bucha. Dmytro Kuleba is calling on G7 leaders to impose new sanctions on Moscow. The UK's Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says indiscriminate attacks on civilians in Ukraine must be investigated as war crimes, insisting those responsible must face justice in the International Criminal Court. The mayor of Bucha described Russian troops leaving the bodies of dead civilians in the streets.
Corpses of executed people still line the Yabolsk street in Bucha. Their hands are tied behind their backs. We will record this page of our history and it will be used at their tribunal, but I wouldn't like to talk about that now. You should understand what emotion of relief we are feeling now.
Well, NATO's Secretary-General has warned Russia's pullback of troops from Ukraine's capital is not a real withdrawal. Speaking to CNN, Jens Stoltenberg warned Moscow could be repositioning its forces for further attacks. It comes after President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's strengthening Ukraine's defences in the east of the country. Plumes of smoke were seen over the southern city of Odessa after Russia claimed strikes have destroyed an oil refinery and 3 fuel storages. President Zelensky says Moscow wants to take control of the east of Ukraine.
We're strengthening our defences in the east of the Donbass. We're aware the enemy has resources to put pressure on the eastern part of the country. What is the aim of the Russian armed forces? They want to seize both the Donbass and the south of our country. What's our aim? To defend our freedom, our land, our people. To do everything to repel them.
Further attempts to evacuate people from the besieged city of Mariupol are continuing today. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk says buses are attempting to get as close as possible, but the situation on the ground is volatile. Tens of thousands of residents are trapped there with food and water in short supply. More than 200 people have been arrested as climate change protests enter their 3rd day at various oil terminals across the UK. Officers say the arrests were for offences including criminal damage, obstructing the highway and public order. Activists from Just Stop Oil are demanding the government end new oil and gas projects. Warwickshire Police say a significant operation remains ongoing at Kingsbury near Tamworth. At least 6 people have been killed and 10 others injured after a shooting in the US state of California. Police have closed off several streets in the city of Sacramento while they investigate. It comes just over a month after a man shot and killed his 3 children, a 4th person and himself at a church in the city. Sacramento Police Chief Catherine Lester says officers were in the area and heard shots fired.
They found a very large crowd here, and they also found that we had a number of people that were shot in the area. Those officers, we know, rendered aid to our victims and called for additional assistance from outside agencies as well as our medical responders with the local fire department.
Pakistan's president has dissolved parliament and called early elections following an opposition attempt to remove Prime Minister Imran Khan from office. It comes after a no-confidence vote in Mr Khan was blocked by the parliament's deputy speaker. The former cricketer, who was elected in 2018, believes the move to oust him was orchestrated by the US, a claim Washington denies. A new treatment for liver cancer, which isolates the organ and protects other parts of the body, has been found to be effective in nearly 90% of patients. The procedure involves using 2 small balloons to divert blood past the liver while delivering drugs directly into the organ. Doctors say the technique, being pioneered at University Hospital Southampton, is better than standard chemotherapy, which can cause damage elsewhere in the body. Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. Let's return to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, over the years, we in the UK have built ourselves a reputation of not being the best behaved, especially when it comes to football. We're also renowned for being a bit of a soft touch, though, when it comes to crime, with the latest figures suggesting a charge rate of just 6%. This means that extremely large numbers of people get away with breaking the law because, let's be honest, many of the so-called petty crimes are simply not worth investigating. There's the paperwork, very few police stations, and lack of investment and support, which has meant that our very worn-out police force are struggling to cope. So I can't wait to see how the British football fans fare at the Qatar World Cup. I mean, everything about it is wrong. Let's start with the human rights abuses. The stadiums in Qatar were mostly built by an enslaved workforce of migrants, many of whom have died during the process. At the last count, the numbers were as high as 400. They apparently cost them £5.26 billion to build and about £150 billion for the supporting infrastructure and the transport links. Qatar has a woeful record for LGBT rights. It's absolutely awful. Basically, being a gay man is illegal. Then there's the cost to get there. If you fancy going to the Qatar World Cup to watch the matches live, let's start with the flight. A direct flight will cost you just over £1,000. Then, once you're there, your hotel is likely to set you back £9,000 per night. Even the weather's against you. Temperatures there at the time the World Cup is being played in December can soar well into the 40-degree mark. Now, to watch a match, you're actually looking at more than £700 per game. And what's football without beer? At £11.50 a pint or a glass of wine at £11, it'll literally be just a beer, because Qatar sells the most expensive beer in the world. British fans are going to get a culture shock. It's going to be hilarious. And don't even think about boozing outside the designated zones or in the stadium itself. Anyone caught doing that would be breaking the law and could face 6 months in jail, and I'm pretty sure they don't get a half sentence for good behaviour. The whole experience across the weekend could cost you around about £30,000. And so if you thought that we have a cost of living crisis here, Qatar will set you straight. Football will definitely be coming home. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. Each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs and lows, the lessons learned, and what comes next on the outside. And today, I'm delighted to tell you I'll be joined in the studio by one of the biggest names in the world of boxing, promoter and manager Kelly Maloney. As she managed former world champion Lennox Lewis, she'll be talking about her time boxing and how she lost friends when she announced her gender transition. The Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, has Rishi Sunak's spring statement affected your vote? There's growing pressure on the Chancellor as senior Conservatives warn that high taxes will fatally undermine the party's appeal to voters in the next general election. Council leaders across the UK are also concerned about the May local elections that could be a damaging impact on the Tory confidence and might actually affect them in the polls. And of course, we've got Worldview. We go to Ukraine, our special just before 5. We'll have a roundtable discussion on the latest that's happening there, the refugee effort, and whether the Ukrainians are really winning the war. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me @gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel, co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albi Amankona, and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. First, right, so welcome aboard. Thank you for coming back, Calvin. Glad you returned after yesterday's discussions. Now, I'm going to start with you, Albi. So, the World Cup. First of all, it's held in Qatar. What do you make of that whole thing actually happening there? Is that something that you actually care about, or something that you think is a bit out of order?
It feels like the closer we get to the World Cup, the more problems with it being held in Qatar come up. We've got the costs that you highlighted earlier, £9,000 a night for a hotel, £11 for a beer or a wine, hundreds of pounds for flight tickets and matches. I'm not really sure who could even afford to go to Qatar, given that it is, a famous English sport. How many English men and women, or indeed British men and women, will want to go there? Then, of course, you've got all of the issues with alcohol only being allowed to be consumed in certain places. And so I'm not really sure if it's the right place. And that's not even talking about the human rights issues, whether or not that's LGBT rights, employment rights and things like that. Just seems like the wrong place, and I feel like it's all been done for the money rather than for the fans.
Of course, I wonder who's going to be killed. I mean, if you're watching now, can you afford to go to Qatar? We'd love to hear it. If you're going, send us a text, send us a message. Right, what do you think, Calvin?
I don't know how people can support a World Cup in Qatar, a nation that used, as you pretty much said, slave labour to build the infrastructure for the World Cup. The migrant workers had no rights, they had wage theft, they had unexplained deaths, their passports were confiscated, and that's just the migrants building the towers. Of course, in the country, there are already backward laws. Women under 25 have to ask permission from their father or their husband just to leave the country. Even after 25, they can still be forbidden from leaving their country. There's certain jobs that women can't have, certain things women can't do, and then there's the whole LGBT rights issue over there as well. So it's a country that I think needs a lot of work on their human rights issues before anyone in the West should be supporting them in any way.
And obviously, lots of the broadcasters are going there. Our very own BBC will be reporting there. I know Gary Lineker said that he's going to be going as well. And it just seems to me, I mean, do you think that our broadcasters, our state broadcaster, I mean, that's kind of what the BBC is, a public broadcaster, should be going there, or is there a case of them not?
Well, they'll have to be careful because there is no freedom of expression over there. There's no freedom of press. If you say something that the state doesn't like, they can say you're spreading fake news, put you in jail for 3 years, or give you a £100,000 fine.
It's funny if that happened to some of our broadcasters from the BBC. I won't name any names. You know who you are.
The BBC will definitely have to be careful, and indeed any broadcasters who go there will have to be careful. But the World Cup, it's a global world event. The BBC and our national broadcasters, including GBNews, cover world events in good places and in bad places. We've had broadcasters in Ukraine at the moment doing some amazing reporting from there. So I think it's important that our broadcasters, national or private, go there and report what's happening on the ground, especially if might be hearing reports of our very own people going there, getting locked up for being gay or because they're drunk on the streets. We need people there that can report that honestly, don't we?
Well, we need to see what happens to those, especially if they've been drunk on the streets. Perhaps our police force could learn a few things from that lot, because I watched the programme, and this was in Dubai, and their police force have they have the most fastest cars, the most beautiful cars, Bugatti Veyrons. That's what they're driving.
Sounds expensive.
Yeah, but they look fantastic, and there's cameras absolutely everywhere, and that is the same sort of thing in Qatar. And people won't be able to get away with stuff. So I'd be very, very interested to hear from anybody who is actually going to Qatar, or Qatar even, because it sounds like something that's trapped in your throat. Which I have some of that right now as it goes. Excuse me.
But yeah, I mean, people will get arrested and given 6 months in prison if they're drunk on the streets. It is very, very rigid and regimented. If you're criticising the emir, you can get locked up. If you're criticising the state, you can get locked up. So people are going to have to be very careful when they're out there, and if they've had a drink or two, what they say and who they say it to.
Well, they've got zero tolerance as well in the stadium itself. So they have zero alcohol beers that you can take in there. But they have cameras everywhere. Anybody breaking the rules will be arrested. They're not messing about here.
But I mean, I guess you could argue in the UK that perhaps our policing of these football events has been too lax. I mean,
I would absolutely
look
argue
what happened at the Euros in last year. All of the disruption that happened, people putting fireworks in all sorts of crevices that they're not meant to be, and the police basically doing absolutely nothing about it. So maybe it's going to be a baptism of fire, and the fans that go there will learn their lesson.
Didn't people storm the stadium at one point, or they didn't even have tickets and they thought they would just come anyway?
Exactly.
That won't be happening in Qatar, by the way. If you think you're going to give them a go, they're not going to go with that at all.
But I mean, with the prices that people are paying to get out there and to stay out there, it's only going to be dedicated fans, isn't it? I don't think we're going to have chances.
And wealthy fans.
Yes, indeed.
But who can afford that? But it does sort of make our cost of living crisis sort of puts it to shame, doesn't it, when you think about how much everything costs there?
Absolutely. You know, Qatar, I think it's one of the most expensive countries to live in the world, and indeed a lot of the Gulf states are the same. I just think it's a shame that we are hosting the World Cup in this country where they've got an awful human rights record. It's unaffordable for most people, and football is the most popular sport in the world, and it's just unfortunate that the very privileged and very wealthy will be the only people that can enjoy it.
Well, let's see how many people fill the actual stadium itself. Sorry, it's finally gone, that.
The Qatar.
Right, so what do you think? Are you going to the World Cup? Are you planning to go to Qatar? Could you afford to even go to Qatar? Get in touch, by the usual route. You can email us, gbviews@gbnews, or you can tweet me at gbnews. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, has Rishi Sunak's spring statement affected your vote? There's growing pressure on the Chancellor. A senior Conservatives warn that high taxes will fatally undermine the party's appeal to voters at the next general election. Council leaders across the UK are also concerned ahead of the May local elections that a damaging impact on Tory confidence might impact them at the polls. So what do you think? I'm asking, has Rishi Sunak's spring statement affected your vote? Send me your email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me your thoughts. Remember to tweet me at gbnews. There is a poll up right now asking that very question. Has Rishi Sunak's spring statement affected your vote? Cast it now. First, let's get some weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry with sunny spells for most, but rain edging in from the northwest. Let's take a look at those details. The southwest will end the day mostly dry with plenty of sunny spells on offer. The odd isolated light shower is possible, but it will be a fine evening for most. It will also be a fine and dry Sunday evening for the southeast. There'll be some fair weather cloud and plenty of sunny spells. Sunny spells will be plentiful across South Wales this evening too. Winds will be mainly light and there'll be a little fair weather cloud. There'll also be a little more cloud across the Midlands, but there'll also be some bright or sunny spells. An isolated light shower is possible, but for most it will remain dry. It's a different story across north-east England, where cloud will be increasing as rain gradually edges in from the north. The winds will also start to increase here through the evening. The wet weather will already be in place across southern Scotland this evening. The rain will be patchy in nature and turn heavy at times, with strong gusty winds too. Northern Ireland will also be cloudy, with patchy outbreaks of rain edging southeastwards through the evening. The winds will also be strengthening here, especially around coastal areas where gales are possible. The cloud, rain and strengthening winds will continue to edge steadily southeast overnight, reaching all areas by the morning. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 21 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua, and I'm also still with my panel, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and also co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albi Amankona. So before the break, we were discussing whether England fans will be singing I Want to Go Home rather than It's Coming Home, as this year's World Cup in Qatar is happening very soon in December. And according to The Sun newspaper, fans will pay around about £9,000 a night for hotels, about £11 for a pint, and about £2,000 for a flight and ticket. And not only that, but if they drink alcohol in a non-dedicated zone, they could face 6 months imprisonment. So let's see what you've been saying. Nick says, it sounds like a perfect opportunity to boycott Qatar. What were the governing bodies thinking? Obviously money. Mind you, there's a lot of fans that could do with a stint in a Qatar jail. Yeah, that's good. Jill says, I don't think it matters where the World Cup is held. England won't win it anyway, so no matter what no matter what it costs, fans will have a miserable time. You do make a good point, though. He's got a good point. And Adam says, I cannot afford to go, nor would I if I could. I love watching the World Cup or Euros, but I'm going to ignore it this year. Football has sold its soul, having the World Cup in Qatar, and I will want no part of it. Well, keep your thoughts coming. Thank you very much for those. They're great at GB Views. Right, let's see. It's time now for our great British debate. And this hour, I'm asking, has Rishi Sunak's spring statement affected your vote? Senior Conservatives are said to be increasingly frustrated with the Chancellor's response to the cost of living crisis and higher tax policies, warning that it could fatally undermine their party's appeal to voters at the next general election. And I watched an interview with Rishi Sunak, I can tell you, and he was questioned about this, and he said, well, sometimes you have to make unpopular decisions. Unpopular? Former Tory Cabinet Minister David Davis says the damage to the party's economic reputation will be deep and lasting. And it's not just Tories in Westminster who are worried about those councillors running in the next month's local elections are frustrated over how the government's actions will affect them at the polls, so much so that Conservative leaflets circulated in London, the Midlands and the north of England, all failing to include Boris Johnson, who was once regarded as the Tory politician able to reach voters that no one else in the party could. So what do you think? Has Rishi Sunak's spring statement affected your vote and more widely affected the Conservative Party across the UK? So let's speak to Professor Paul Baines. He's a Professor of Political Marketing at the University of Leicester. Paul, thank you so much for joining me. I want to ask, first of all, that's not Paul. Paul's gone. Well, we'll come back to Paul in a minute. Right, so let's come back to Albert and Calvin then, whilst we're trying to find Paul. That was that great British voice. You can also be one. Go and email us. Yes, so what do you think? How this statement, right, Calvin, I'm going to start with you. The main points in the statement that you thought were good, if any.
Oh, sugar, good. I wasn't prepared for that. No, I think this is a massive letdown, and it's a great shame because the Conservative Party has lost its way socially. They're not socially conservative on many issues. In fact, I consider them quite woke on a lot of issues.
What about the spring statement?
But where
that's about economics.
But where they've been strong, which is what I'm getting to, is their economic stance, and people have relied on the Conservative Party to be economically, fiscally responsible. Now, this statement, it does the opposite. It's the absolute opposite of what Conservative policy should be. It's about increasing taxes. It's about increasing the reliance on the taxpayer to cover the costs of the party spending. Now, the party has spent more than we can ever recover, more than we can ever pay back. There's £300 billion alone for COVID measures, and people say, yeah, but it has to be, the money has to be taken from somewhere. No, the lockdowns did not work, and the government have come out and apologised pretty much and said the lockdowns did not work as a measure to disrupt COVID. Therefore, paying people to stay at home was a mistake. So we are now, and our kids and our grandkids are going to be paying back that expensive cost. To what end? It didn't do any good. And to free up the economy, to get some of this money back, to recuperate some of the costs, what we should do is what Conservatives always do, is be economically responsible. Say, okay, you keep, as individuals, you keep more of the money you earned, therefore you get to spend more money, therefore you get to get taxed more regularly, and therefore the state has more money to play with. To say that we need to increase taxes of individuals, such as national insurance tax, goes against everything that we stand for.
Well, it does seem a bit odd that they should be doing that, because everything I've ever studied in economics, and I did study economics, said that what you need to do is give people more money to spend so that you can increase the flow of money within the economy. And then, of course, that'll end up making the economy bigger and you get more taxes from the money because more people will be working and so on and so forth. This does appear to be doing the very opposite, although there was one thing that you said about lockdowns not working, and I have to say that in some respects, they may work at some level.
In what way did
Not
they
financially,
in what way did they
but I'm saying that if you keep people apart from others, then you're less likely to spread an infection to other people. That's only in that way. But I think we've got Professor Paul Baines back. He's our political marketing. He's there. Professor Baines, thank you so much for joining us. Right, so I want to start with the damage, whether you think or not Rishi Sunak's spring statement has actually done any damage to the Conservative Party. And in your view, if that is the case, what do you think it's done?
Well, I think it's probably fairly limited. What he's managed, he's got a delicate balancing act because he's got to try and balance both the forthcoming local elections and the general election, which would now be needed to be held before the 23rd of January 2025. So it's a case that he's trying to balance what the situation is at the moment with what it will be like in the future. And I think he's, to some extent, helped himself by increasing the national insurance level at which it kicks in from 9,500 to 12,500. That's designed, I think, to shore up the blue wall vote in the council elections, and then down the line is promised to reduce income tax from 20 pence to 19. It is jammed tomorrow, of course, but I think what he's trying to do is develop a war chest for a future election, and he's also restored the triple lock. So I think there's some short-term hit to his reputation. I think it was a fairly lacklustre budget statement, but I think it's limited, and he might just get through this.
Do you think? Well, what about the argument that what we were hoping to see was a real assistance to people on lower incomes, and what he did was reduce taxes for people who could probably afford cars or heat pumps or, things that are quite expensive. So really it didn't particularly target those who were mostly in need, and there wasn't anything there. Do you not think that because of that, a lot of people might look at the Conservative Party and start asking questions?
Well, I think a key thing is the duty on fuel, and I recognise that that's a little bit of a drop in the ocean, 5 pence on a litre, but it is something, and it's probably as much as they could afford to do. So I think that he feels that he's done what he can in order to have some sort of prudence. The difficulty is we've had these shocks to the UK system. We've now got Ukraine, but before that we had COVID, and before that Brexit. So we've got major shocks to the economy. and an attempt to balance all that, given the massive expenditure, that the question for the government is, do we raise tax or reduce spending, or both, or try and inflate our way out of the problem? And I think what they're trying to do is some sort of mixture of all three. Now, when it comes to the general election by 2025, because the Fixed Term Parliament Act being repealed, I think they're going to look at some sort of war chest that will help them reduce the income tax overall. But I think you're right to question his reputation and the party's reputation as the party of low tax, because it's certainly the case that most polls show at the moment Labour as the party of low tax, which is fairly extraordinary, and I think would be very, very worrying for Tory strategists.
I think it is very worrying for all of us because, as Calvin said earlier, we consider the Conservatives as those who are more fiscally responsible, not the Labour Party. So it's interesting that I don't know whether the Labour Party will be more fiscally responsible. Is there a feeling that most people who have lost confidence in the Tories might actually then turn to Labour, or are the Tories still, in your view, the most attractive party for most people?
Well, I think it's difficult. I think the polls show that, of course, Labour's slightly ahead at the moment, and that's interesting. But the question is, will that stay the case when it comes to voting in the local elections? I think usually you would expect to see the government of the day lose a lot of seats, and they haven't been losing a lot of seats. So we might now start to see significant losses in the local elections. Now, the time when it comes to the general election, I think that depends on whether they amass sufficient of war chest to lower tax down the line. It's interesting to note that the vast majority of Conservative voters, well, not a vast majority, but a very large constituency, is older people. And seniors are twice as likely to vote, and there's almost twice as many of them. So the Conservative Party will always look after them, and it has restored the triple lock from, I think it's 2023. So that constituency is fundamental. The other one, to stay in power with a thumping majority, is these blue wall seat voters. And keeping those is going to be so much harder.
It will be interesting to see if they do. Paul, thank you so much for joining me. That's Paul Baines. He's a Professor of Political Marketing at the University of Leicester. Right, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. I'm asking, has Rishi Sunak's spring statement affected your vote? Liz says, I feel politically homeless, to be honest. I don't think Rishi has done enough and seems to totally be out of touch with real people. But I really don't want Labour anywhere near government. So help, no idea what to do. Bob says, Boris and co, not the best, but just thinking about this country under a Labour government is terrifying. And Pete says, as a lifelong Conservative voter, I can say I am honestly, in all honesty, I will never vote for them again. The COVID debacle was the first step in breaking my confidence, then Partygate, but Rishi Sunak's apparent lack of understanding of the hardships facing everyday people is quite unbelievable. Interesting. Keep your thoughts coming. We'd love to hear your views. You're still with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, we'll continue the Great British Debate, and I'm asking, has Rishi Sunak's spring statement affected your vote? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel. Co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albi Amankona, and also Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. First, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 4:32. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's foreign minister is accusing Russia of carrying out a deliberate massacre in the town of Bucha outside Kiev. Dmytro Kuleba is calling on G7 leaders to impose new sanctions on Moscow. The UK's Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says these indiscriminate attacks on civilians must be investigated as war crimes. NATO's Secretary-General has warned Russia's pullback of troops from Ukraine's capital is not a real withdrawal. Speaking to CNN, Jens Stoltenberg warned Moscow could be repositioning its forces for further attacks. It comes after President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's strengthening Ukraine's defences in the east of the country. Plumes of smoke were seen over the southern city of Odessa after Russia's defence ministry claimed strikes have destroyed an oil refinery and 3 fuel storages. Conservative MP David Warburton has reportedly been admitted to a psychiatric hospital with severe shock and stress. It's pending an investigation into allegations of his conduct. The Somerton and Frome MP had the Tory whip withdrawn yesterday. Mr Warburton is said to deny any wrongdoing. At least 6 people have been killed and 10 others injured after a shooting in the US state of California. Police have closed off several streets in the city of Sacramento while they investigate. It comes just over a month after a man shot and killed himself, his 3 children and another person at a church in the city. And a new treatment for liver cancer, which isolates the organ and protects other parts of the body, has been found to be effective in nearly 90% of patients. The procedure involves using 2 small balloons to divert blood past the liver while delivering drugs directly into the organ. It's being pioneered in the UK at the University Hospital, Southampton. Well, on TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We'll be back to Nana Akua after the break.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
So if you've just joined me, where have you been? This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 38 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Right, so back to our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, has Rishi Sunak's spring statement affected your vote? Now, despite the Chancellor announcing some measures to try and help families across the UK, and I did help with some speech marks there, with the cost of living crisis, like cutting fuel duty by 5p, it doesn't seem to have convinced Conservative MPs. Some senior Tories are increasingly frustrated with the Chancellor's high tax policies, warning that it could fatally undermine their party's appeal to voters at the next general election. And it's not just Tories in Westminster who are also worried. Those councillors running in the next month's local elections are frustrated over how the government's actions will affect them as well. So I'm asking, has Rishi Sunak's spring statement affected your vote? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albi Aman-Kona. Right, so Albi, I'm going to start with you. Your thoughts then. First of all, I asked Calvin a bit about the good things in his statement. Can you pick out any at all?
I think the main good thing I would pick out was, of course, this promise of an income tax cut at some point. Otherwise, I think a lot of people were probably feeling quite deflated by this statement to tackle high inflation. And I think the party has got a lot of work to do with Conservative voters and people who voted for us in 2019, people who might not vote for us now because of our policies on other things. And the May elections are going to be a real test. And if we think back to 2019, the two main reasons why people voted Conservative was because they wanted to get Brexit done and because they didn't want Jeremy Corbyn to be the Prime Minister. Both of those things are gone. And if I think back over the last 2-year period from 2019 until now, what is it that Conservatives can actually talk about being successful? Honestly, if I dig deep, I think the main thing is the vaccine rollout. But other than that, things aren't looking very good at the moment, and I think that should really concern people at CCHQ with what is our offer going to be at the next generation, because it can't be the vaccine rollout, and I'm not really sure what else it could be.
I think the trade deals are a benefit. Liz Truss has done fantastic. Other than that, I'm with you. The positives of Brexit will probably be the main argument. But look, it comes down to what does the Conservative Party represent? It should be, socially, it should be in favour of family. On social issues such as gender, race and sexuality, it should be more conservative. Economically, it should be about living within your means. It should be about low taxation. It should be about buying British and putting British interests first. And it's not ticking any of those boxes right now. Socially, we're looking at intersectionality and victimhood, left, right and centre. Economically, we're looking at globalists, and we seem to think that the free market is the answer to everything, whereas the free market is a means to an end. It's not an ideology in itself. And then we have socialism in the fact of borrowing loads of money and spending loads of money and then increasing taxation to pay for it. So people like me are stuck. I'm politically homeless. I don't know how. I couldn't vote for Labour for obvious reasons. But right now, I'd struggle to vote for the Conservative Party.
And it seems that everything the Conservative Party are doing, many of the things you'd expect from a Labour government. So constantly, I don't think there's anything wrong with, apping things like universal credit and everything. But even the furlough scheme was sort of a very socialist thing to do, really. I respect that something had to be done. But even the way it was done, so for example, people who are self-employed, who are usually the lifeblood of an economy, 3 million of them were actually just left high and dry. It made absolutely no sense. Yeah. So they were expected to live on some sort of air vapours. I don't know how Rishi Sunak could have allowed that. I mean, I think that they should be compensated because I thought some of them lost their homes, their businesses, their credit ratings and everything else that would help them move forward in life. So I am also politically homeless. I look at the Labour Party and I'm struggling. I hear Keir Starmer not able to say whether a woman has a penis or not. I mean, that was an interesting one. Just the basics. It's OK to say that actually women don't have penises. I'm happy to say that. I don't understand why he was at such pains to evade answering questions. And I look at the Liberal Democrats and I don't know where they are. Who are they? Where are they? What's left?
Yes, well, they've only got about 10 MPs, so we don't need to waste too much time on the Lib Dems. But on the Conservatives, I think this is an interesting issue, actually, when you speak to people about the Conservative Party, and I guess Britain more broadly, is that we seem to want to have an American-style tax system, lower taxes, pro-business environment that I'm for, but then people want to expect European-style public services, and the two things, they just don't match. And it's really difficult, I think, for politicians at the moment to be talking about living within our means, because that means, either if we want to raise money for public services, we've got to raise taxes, no one likes that. We've got to cut spending, no one likes that. Or we've got to borrow more, and we're already going to be spending 83 billion on our debt interest this year. So the options are really limited, and it's resulted in this budget where the Chancellor hasn't really done that much, I think, for the cost of living crisis. But ultimately, I think that's because his eye is on the fact that 83 billion is going to servicing our debt. And what do Labour want to do? They want to borrow more to pay for the cost of living crisis.
See, I'm annoyed that they can't start looking into where the money is being wasted. So, for example, the NHS, can they not sort of look at the procurement within the NHS? Can they not start? I mean, the first thing I do is look at my bank account and say, what am I wasting money on? What do I need to stop spending on? How can I tighten things? They're not even looking at tightening the purse strings. All they've talked about is taking money from us to pay for the hole that's been created by ridiculous levels of spending, like £37 billion wasted, which they can't track or trace, and it wasn't just on track or trace, from the pandemic with this loan scheme and all the money that they dished out. Dishy-rishy, a dish best served cold. Right, but as ever, this show is nothing without you and your views. So let's welcome our great British voice. Calvin wasn't amused. This is your opportunity to be on the show. Tell us what you really think about the topics we're discussing. And Chris Davis is there in London. Chris, it's your turn. Let's see. Let's go over to London. This is almost like the Eurovision Song Contest, but they go somewhere. Chris, so tell me a bit about what do you think then? Hi. What's your view?
Nana, it's hard to deviate really from the fact that the Conservatives seem to be the least worst option, which is never a good reason to vote for anybody. They are neither Conservative nor Unionist, ask Northern Ireland. Calvin's quite right, they're neither socially nor fiscally conservative. We have a so-called low-tax Chancellor who's imposing tax rises throughout the parliamentary term that are the highest for over 70 years. We have inflation, depending on which metric you use, at 6.2 or 8.2%, which in reality is nearer 12, ask Liam Halligan. And the retail price index figure actually affects mobile phone charges and broadband charges and is actually more relevant. Growth and wage growth are way below the level of inflation and will be next year, so we have stagflation. The increase in national insurance and the freezing of personal allowances is going to hurt everybody. Council tax is now averaging £2,000 per household. The triple lock has been broken for pensioners on fixed incomes. The energy price cap's gone up £700 already, and it will go up another £800 in October unless wholesale energy prices dramatically change. In short, the Chancellor needs to remove VAT on domestic fuel, a key Brexit commitment. He needs to scrap the renewables levy. It raises £9 billion, which is effectively state aid to the renewables sector. And he needs to consult his Laffer curve. Because if he does that, then taxation would come down, it would stimulate economic growth, and it would help to start and clear the deficit. Finally, the only reason to vote for the Tories is if somebody says what a woman is. Adult human female does not have a penis. It really is not hard. If they don't do that, they're going to lose 1,000 seats in these local elections, which are effectively half-time in the 5-year term. Yes, the Fixed Term Parliament Act has gone, but broadly speaking, this is D- territory. If they don't do better, they are out at the next election. Even if they win the most seats, there'll be a coalition of the left to keep them out.
Thank you very much, Chris. Very succinct. And I'm afraid I have to say that I'm consulting my Laffer curve, and I think you're absolutely right. Thank you so much for that. Yes, that's Chris Davies. He's our GB voice, Great British Voice. You can also be a voice, you know. All you have to do is just email us, tell us your thoughts, get in touch with the show. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Yeah, he's made a point, hasn't he? He's made quite a few very good points.
He's a good egg, Chris. People want representatives that do not lie to them. And if a person cannot stand there and say the biological truth that a woman is an adult female human, then they're not going to get votes. Because people know the truth. People know basic biology, and they don't want to be lied to.
Yes, indeed. I think that this whole question of female biology, which is being put to a lot of MPs at the moment, and we're seeing, headlines being made when a Labour MP says a woman is an adult human female. I think it was Wes Streeting that said that. And I think it just goes to show that I think on all fronts of politics at the moment, whether or not it's economic or social, we're in a really sticky place at the moment. And I think all parties, all sides of arguments need to work much harder to find the solutions to problems that go on in everyday people's lives.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you see, I look at it all and I just think some of the most obvious basic things our politicians are ailing us on, but it's all of them, isn't it? So where do we go? Who do we vote for? But has what Rishi Sunak has sprung on us, this spring statement, has it affected your view and your opinion as to whether you are even interested in voting for the Conservative Party? Get in touch. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Pauline says, yes, Rishi Sunak's budget has affected the way I'll vote in the future. Damaging. Jacob says, I still won't vote Tory. Bunch of liars. Katrina says, MPs have had a pay rise. I was going to mention that. I'm glad you did. And many with second jobs, yes, and plus all the key perks. They do not have empathy with the lower paid UK public. They are tone deaf. Labour, however, do not seem a viable party. So what choice is there? That's what I was saying. It's a nightmare. Mike says, should we set up our own? Having done away with the pensions triple lock this year, he's shot himself and the Conservative Party in the foot. He's lost the grey vote. The thing is, he's saying it's going to come back, but that's no great...
Once these things are lost, they never come back.
Yeah, and also the fact that he said he's going to cut taxes in 2024. They might even call an election before then. No, he might not be Chancellor. So whatever he says might not mean anything. And Steve says, I will always vote for the Tories. Who else is fit to run this country? I'll wait. And I love this one. John sent me a message here and he says, GB News will not be successful until you allow people to call in with their views on subjects that no stations will speak of, and you have a text number available for the unwashed. That's what he said. That was ridiculous. Yes, I just thought that was just an interesting little message. Why don't you can send us a message here. There's also a poll up on Twitter today throughout the show asking, has Rishi Sunak's spring statement affected your vote? And currently, 43% of you say yes, 56% of you, says 1% missing, say no, it hasn't. Somebody can't do the maths. Right, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, we'll have a round-table discussion on the latest in Ukraine as Russia claims to destroy oil refineries in a missile attack. We'll also discuss the refugee effort and whether the Ukrainians are really winning the war. But first, let's get some weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry with sunny spells for most, but rain edging in from the northwest. Let's take a look at those details. The southwest will end the day mostly dry with plenty of sunny spells on offer. The odd isolated light shower is possible, but it will be a fine evening for most. It will also be a fine and dry Sunday evening for the southeast. There'll be some fair weather cloud and plenty of sunny spells. Sunny spells will be plentiful across South Wales this evening too. Winds will be mainly light and there'll be a little fair weather cloud. There'll also be a little more cloud across the Midlands, but there'll also be some bright or sunny spells. An isolated light shower is possible, but for most it will remain dry. It's a different story across north-east England, where cloud will be increasing as rain gradually edges in from the north. The winds will also start to increase here through the evening. The wet weather will already be in place across southern Scotland this evening. The rain will be patchy in nature and turn heavy at times, with strong gusty winds too. Northern Ireland will also be cloudy, with patchy outbreaks of rain edging southeastwards through the evening. The winds will also be strengthening here, especially around coastal areas where gales are possible. The cloud, rain and strengthening winds will continue to edge steadily southeast overnight, reaching all areas by the morning. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss, and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, coming up in about 10 minutes' time, I'll be joined in the studio by one of the biggest names in the world of boxing, promoter and manager Kelly Maloney. who managed former world champion Lennox Lewis. She's going to talk about her time in boxing and how she lost friends when she announced her gender transition. But first, it's time for the part of the show where we discuss some of the stories hitting the headlines across the globe. And today, we're going to be focusing on the latest in Ukraine. Now, it is believed that Russian missiles hit a fuel depot near Ukraine's southern port of Odessa this morning, but there were no casualties. Whilst here in the UK, the Foreign Secretary says indiscriminate attacks on civilians in Ukraine must be investigated as war crimes. So let's start by speaking to Alan Mendoza. He's the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Alan, thank you so much for joining me. So yesterday we saw a real step forward in Kyiv with Russian troops withdrawing, and today more devastation in Odessa. Is the war in Ukraine on a knife edge now?
Well, it's not on a knife edge in the sense that, Ukraine isn't going to suddenly win the war.
You don't think?
No, what the Russians are doing is just refocusing their attention on, more manageable objectives. What is quite clear is that it's on a knife edge in the sense of Putin's original plan. In fact, it's off a knife edge. He lost. He didn't get what he wanted, a three-pronged attack where he would sweep the country.
So you don't think Ukraine could win this at all?
Not militarily, no. Now, it can win it in the court of public opinion. It can win it, if Russia is brought to its knees in other ways. But from a military perspective, what the Russians are now doing is withdrawing to focus fire, particularly on the east of the country. They hope to win there, and then they will spread out from that point. It's a much more manageable objective for them.
But you also had your Michael Fish moment when you said that you didn't think that he wanted to unite Russia as a Soviet like it was before. And I said that, and you said, no, he doesn't want to do that. And he did. He did want to do that.
Who did?
Vladimir Putin, yes.
Well, I'm not sure he wants to unite the whole country in that sort of way.
I think, he was looking to try and recreate the Soviet Union. It does look like that to me.
Well, it's one possibility. At the moment, I don't think he's anywhere close to achieving that kind of aim. What I think he's doing right now is, I've got to win something. Let me win something, then we'll look at the sort of process after that. And I think, if you're looking at how this actually unfolds eventually, he will look what happens in the East now. The East is going to be the crucial battlefield.
So you think he's obviously going to want to get all these sort of the coastal areas to try and block Ukraine off from the sea?
Yes, so he's focusing the east, and then you mentioned obviously Odessa was also under attack. Odessa's obviously to the southwest of the country, but you're right, that will basically end up trying to prevent Ukraine's access from the sea, make it landlocked, mean that he will control that whole southern seaboard as well, and again increase the pressure on the Ukrainian economy in particular.
I hear people saying, oh, well, what Ukraine should concede some of their land. I would not. I mean, I personally wouldn't concede anything. I don't see why they should have to do that. But now let's get the latest actually on the ground and speak to those who are looking to get family back in the UK. So joining in with the conversation is Maria Avdina, who's the Research Director of the European Expert Association, and Anna Vitiak, who's a Ukrainian living in the UK trying to bring her family over. Right, so let's start with... I'm going to start with Anna, actually, because you're trying to get your family back to the UK. Talk to me about what's happening there.
Hi.
Yes, how are you managing? Yeah, we can hear you. So how are you managing? How are you getting on trying to get your family to the UK?
I mean, I have really extensive family. I have a lot of cousins. I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and so far my family, they managed to get visa to come here. They managed to get a permission, and I flew to Warsaw, and I was helping my sister-in-law and 3 kids to get visa, so they've got that permission to come to UK. And then my mom got the permission, my dad got permission, my brother, and 1 auntie and 1 uncle as well, and then another niece. And then I've been waiting for the rest of my family to get them a visa from the 22nd of March. And where are we now? Sunday the 3rd of April, and it's only today they've got a granted permission to come to UK. So, my family lives in Western Ukraine. They live in Lviv. They're being bombed as well, but they're not being as severely bombed as these people in the other parts of Ukraine. So imagine if you're a refugee and you're trying to escape a war and you didn't take any documents with you and you strangle somewhere in Poland or somewhere in Romania, you need to pay your rent, you need to get somewhere food. If you have no money, how would you survive a family of 10 people, for example? And if you like struggling to get a visa for 2 weeks. It's just the entry clearance to come to UK. Moreover, after that, you need to book a biometric, and biometric is the whole new process, the same as getting a visa. And I was trying to get a slot because my family is coming here, hopefully, on the 6th, which is Wednesday next week. So, you know, and then I've got them biometric on the 7th in Luton because I've pre-booked everything in advance. And then there is no slots available around London until 27th of April. So we need to have either more offices open or longer hours because it's unacceptable.
Well, it's unacceptable. And I want to bring Maria in as well. You know, I don't know why it's such a mess, I mean, but we in this country are renowned for sort of being so disorganised and organised at the same time. Maria, what's your view on the situation on the ground, and how do you see things panning out at this stage? Because obviously it does look, as Alan said, that the Russians are retreating, but it does also look like they're potentially sort of regrouping to block Ukraine from and create a landlocked scenario for them. What do you see?
I think, yeah, I agree with that. I think that is the most possible scenario for now, that they are regrouping and trying to get more reserves to attack harder on east and south of Ukraine, because Vladimir Putin is very obsessed with numbers, as we know. And the 9th of May is the so-called Victory Day in Russia, which is celebrated hugely. And he has accommodated very many things around this date and use it to unite the population in this war and in the war that was happening in Ukraine since 2014. So what it looks like now, that he might need some kind of victory to show to his people, because as of now he has nothing to show, because Russia has not get any goals that has been put by Putin when he announced this war. They were not able, Russian troops were not able to get control over any major city. In Kharkiv, they are stalled on the north and east of the city. Russian troops were never inside the city. They tried several times at the beginning, but then they were effectively fought back or eliminated right on the spot. And now they continue these tactics of constant shelling and bombardments. So the shelling do not stop. They continue all the time. I've been today and the day before in the district. Before that, it was a very highly populated district in the north of the city, which is called Saltivka, and now it's completely empty. No one is living there. I today saw people cooking outside on the fire because they have no kind of energy supply or anything.
It sounds terrible. It sounds awful, the scenario, and I really hope that there is some resolution and quickly, because this can't carry on. Anna Akua, thank you so much for joining us, as well as Maria also for joining us there in Ukraine, Maria Abdina, and also Alan Mendoza for joining us there. That was Worldview. We'll obviously be following the situation with Ukraine. You're watching me, Nana Akua. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. So this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics hitting the headlines first. But let's get those headlines now.
Good afternoon, it's 5:01. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's foreign minister is accusing Russia of carrying out what he's calling a deliberate massacre in the town of Bucha. Dmytro Kuleba is calling on G7 leaders to impose new sanctions on Moscow. The UK's Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says indiscriminate attacks on civilians in Ukraine must be investigated as war crimes, insisting those responsible must face justice in the International Criminal Court. The mayor of Bucha described Russian troops leaving the bodies of dead civilians in the streets.
Corpses of executed people still line the Yablsk street in Bucha. Their hands are tied behind their backs. We will record this page of our history and it will be used at their tribunal, but I wouldn't like to talk about that now. You should understand what emotion of relief we are feeling now.
Meanwhile, Liz Truss has tweeted that Russia is still blocking life-saving humanitarian support from reaching the besieged city of Mariupol. She said Russia must allow aid agencies access to reach those in vital need of support, whoever and wherever they are. Further attempts to evacuate people from the city are continuing today. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk says buses are attempting to get as close as possible, but the situation on the ground is volatile. NATO's Secretary-General has warned Russia's pullback of troops from Ukraine's capital is not a real withdrawal. Speaking to CNN, Jens Stoltenberg warned Moscow could be repositioning its forces for further attacks. Plumes of smoke were seen over the southern city of Odessa after Russia claimed strikes have destroyed an oil refinery and 3 fuel storages. President Zelensky says Moscow wants to take control of the east of Ukraine.
We're strengthening our defences in the east of the Donbass. We're aware the enemy has resources to put pressure on the eastern part of the country. What is the aim of the Russian armed forces? They want to seize both the Donbass and the south of our country. What's our aim? To defend our freedom, our land, our people. To do everything to repel them.
Conservative MP David Warburton has reportedly been admitted to a psychiatric hospital with severe shock and stress. It's pending an investigation into allegations of his conduct. The Somerton and Frome MP had the Tory whip withdrawn yesterday. Mr Warburton is said to deny any wrongdoing. More than 200 people have been arrested as climate change protests enter their 3rd day at various oil terminals across the UK. Officers say the arrests were for offences including criminal damage, obstructing the highway and public order. Activists from Just Stop Oil are demanding the government end new oil and gas projects. Warwickshire Police say a significant operation remains ongoing at Kingsbury near Tamworth. Well, at least 6 people have been killed and 10 others injured after a shooting in the US state of California. Police have closed off several streets in the city of Sacramento while they investigate. It comes just over a month after a man shot and killed himself, his 3 children and another person at a church in the city. Sacramento Police Chief Catherine Lester says officers were in the area and heard shots fired.
They found a very large crowd here, and they also found that we had a number of people that were shot in the area. Those officers, we know, rendered aid to our victims and called for additional assistance from outside agencies as well as our medical responders with the local fire department.
Pakistan's president has dissolved parliament and called early elections following an opposition attempt to remove Prime Minister Imran Khan from office. It comes after a no-confidence vote in Mr Khan was blocked by the parliament's deputy speaker. The former cricketer who was elected in 2018 believes the move to oust him was orchestrated by the US, a claim Washington denies. And a new treatment for liver cancer, which isolates the organ and protects other parts of the body, has been found to be effective in nearly 90% of patients. The procedure involves using 2 small balloons to divert blood past the liver while delivering drugs directly into the organ. Doctors say the technique, being pioneered at University Hospital Southampton, is better than standard chemotherapy, which can cause damage elsewhere in the body. Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana Akua.
So it's coming up to 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Alvi Amankona, and also Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Still to come, in a few moments' time, I'll be joined by one of the biggest names in boxing for my feature, Outside. Kelly Maloney was the manager of former world champion Lennox Lewis. She'll talk about the highs, the lows and of her time in the sport and how she lost friends when she announced her gender transition. Formerly known as Frank, she says that mates didn't understand her decision because they weren't real mates. They weren't real men's men. Oh, they were real men's men. I'm going to get it right. Do you know, I just asked her myself. She's here. Right, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, who wrote this stuff? I'm asking, would you live next door to a wind farm? The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has called for a colossal wind farm to be built in the Irish Sea. It's as he prepares to reveal the government's new energy strategy next week. But I want to take a deeper dive into wind power and find out whether it should really play more of a role in the national grid. And obviously let me know your thoughts as usual. You can email gbnews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. So first, it's now time for Outside. Of course, it's the part of the show where I get to meet a celebrity, an MP, or someone who's had a very, very interesting career to talk about their life. And this week, I'm speaking to someone who knows how it feels to be uncomfortable in their own skin. Kelly Maloney was the manager and promoter for the three-time world boxing heavyweight champion Lennox Lewis, formerly known as Frank. In 2014, she announced she would be known as Kelly, underwent a gender reassignment procedure. And I'm pleased to say that Kelly Maloney joins me in the studio now. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, wow. My goodness, you've had a very, very interesting career. I mean, it's been fascinating reading all about you. I'm reading your book. I really, so I want to start from sort of the beginning, because I was reading about how when you were younger and you even then had the feelings that perhaps you were in the wrong body. So talk to me about what it was like for you growing up and where it was.
Well, growing up, I mean, I grew up in a typical working-class Irish Catholic family, and I was the oldest of three boys, and my father was very sport-orientated and very much like old school, like boys were boys, girls were girls. And from day one, we always played football. He had us like all playing in a football team, all went to boxing gyms. Took us to Millwall, unfortunately, and I still support them. And
for your sins.
Yes. But I just felt different, but I didn't know what it was because there was no one to speak to. I mean, we were altar boys at the local church as well, so that made it very hard because we were always taught in them days there was only black and white, there was no grey area. And and that's how I was brought up. So I was brought up in the environment, and I always say you're a product of your environment. And I was a product of the environment I was brought up in the streets of Peckham. And it wasn't until I read an article about April Ashley, and when I read this article, I realised, and I could relate to everything she was saying, and I just thought what she's gone through and how the British press have destroyed her and the British legal system at the time. There was no way I would ever admit to it, so I decided to fight it all my life. But it got to a stage where my mental pressure really closed in on me. I was destroying my family, I was destroying everything. I was destroying the business that I built up. And I attempted suicide, and eventually I just had to look in the mirror and face the truth and let Kelly, who was on this shoulder all my life, and Frank on this shoulder, win the battle and be true to myself.
And of course, April Ashley was the first person in this country to have gender reassignment surgery.
Yes, amazing woman. Yeah. She died in December, I think, November, December last year. But the way she was treated was unbelievable. And also another one who I followed was Caroline Crossley, the way she was treated by the national press in this country. She had to leave the country, and obviously she's now living in America. And sometimes we speak on Facebook, not often, but and I just think it's such a hard journey, it's such a intrusive journey, and especially if you're in the public eye. I mean, I wish I could have transitioned privately and just lived my life normally, and I think everything would have been okay. But because of my past career, as soon as someone found out who I was, it was all over the place.
I know, it was out in the Mirror, wasn't it?
Yeah, I chose to go with the Mirror after my legal team advised me that I had to take control of the situation. My eldest daughter, my lawyer, met with a number of newspapers, And we decided with the Mirror, because they gave us editorial rights, headline rights, picture rights, and they used all the right terminology, which is so important, because I wanted to change this. I didn't want to change this, but I want people to understand this is not a fantasy. This is something that, to me, I believe it's an illness, but a lot of people don't believe it's an illness. I don't believe it's a mental illness, but I believe it is a physical illness.
Because you talk in your book of not having the maturity or knowledge to deal with the situation that you were in when you were young. So you had sort of a feeling that something wasn't right. When was it that you sort of felt, actually, no, I want to be a woman? Was there some point when you were very young that you knew that?
Around about 16, I wouldn't, but I just thought I can't, because I was so afraid of what my family would think. I would lose my family, my respect to my mother and father. Later, was I to find out my mother would have been very supportive at early days, but it would have destroyed my mother and father's relationship. Though they separated eventually, but you know, my father was a very traditional old Irishman, so I'm not sure he would have understood.
And do you wish that you could have... So nowadays, you know, people criticise people like Nicola Sturgeon for saying things so, well, young people should be allowed to determine what sex they are even when they're 4 years old. And people who talk about puberty blockers when people are, say, before puberty. If you had had the option to do that, would you have done it? And do you think that it's the right way forward, just from your experience?
I believe, well, first of all, you can't change your sex, because biologically we're born men. So I always say I'm a medically constructed woman. So it's a gender identity that I had. I would love to have been born a woman, but I wasn't, so I had to accept what I was. Would I have? Yes, but then I lived such a fantastic life, and my life made me the person I am today. And I learnt by all the mistakes I made as Frank, because Frank made a lot of mistakes, and I've been able to correct them there and look at the world in a totally different way. So I always say I can run from my past, but I can't hide from my past. So 60 years as Frank Maloney is the person that made Kelly Maloney. So I suppose, in a way, I just accept my life as it is.
Yeah, and you're having a great life by the looks of it. You're doing some great things. I wanted to ask you, because you were into boxing, and obviously that was your big thing, and you boxed yourself. What do you think about this whole transgender sport discussion that's going on at the moment?
Well, I think it's a very toxic subject. I actually don't like talking about it, because, but I don't think there's enough medical evidence either side, because, you know, I was going to do a debate about it with one of your commentators last week, but it got changed to something else. What's his name? Will Smith knocked out someone.
Oh, did he? Yeah. He slapped. It was just a slap.
So it all got changed. Yeah.
Knockout.
So, I was researching it quite a bit, and you know, even the scientific world can't totally agree. I think sport has to be safe. I think trans women should be allowed to compete in sport as long as the safety element is protected. I don't think trans women should be able to box in women's sport. But athletics and other, you know, let's look at it. There's this big outrage, but there's never been an Olympic winner in the Olympics. We had one transgender woman in the Olympics, last Olympics. She came stone last. We had a Canadian footballer in the trans women team that won a gold medal, but she was one of 11 women, you know. And I feel sorry for trans sports people, because their life is dragged through the press. Let's take the swimmer that won in America the other week. Her life has been totally upheavaled. Emily Bridges, the cyclist that was supposed to ride this weekend, her life has been totally upheavaled now. She may never recover from that. Yeah. You have to be very strong mentally and physically to come through what the press put you through.
It's difficult enough, isn't it, going through something where you're going to literally upheaval your entire life and those around you, and it will affect them as well. How did this what kind of effect did this have on your family?
I was quite lucky. Obviously, my partner and I split up over it. We've remained friends. My youngest daughter struggled the most, I believe. She's sort of come to terms now. She's very good. My other two daughters, my middle daughter didn't really understand it, but she stuck by me, and now, you know, she's permanently there. My eldest daughter was my rock. Emma, and she still is. It's a little bit role reversed. She's more the parent now than and I'm the child. But my daughters are very much part of my life, and I'm very lucky.
Yeah, it's like that when my mum comes over. I think she's going to help me, but she's not. She's child number 3. I was going to ask you, now, in 2004, the London mayor election, you were a UKIP candidate.
Yes.
And you made some comments. So I was going to ask you about those, because you said, I don't want to campaign around gays. I don't think they do a lot for society. What I have a problem with is them openly flaunting their sexuality.
Yes, I did say that. And again, that was, as I said, that was the mistakes I learned. You know, as Frank Maloney, a boxing promoter, I would say anything. I was obviously a defensive mechanism as well. I was wrong to say them, and I have apologised publicly since. And I regret saying them. But it goes back to what I said. I can run from my past, but I can't hide from my past. Unfortunately, the internet has changed the world.
And you do often find that sometimes when people are in denial, then they go the other way and make comments.
Yeah, I tried to be really a macho little South Londoner. And, you know, I wasn't a nice person, I admit to that. You know, the other day I was talking to someone who said, Kelly, you're much nicer than Frank was. And I went, but I'm the same. And they went, no, you don't realise, we were terrified of you, Frank. You know, like, he was always angry. And then I look at pictures of myself and I see pictures of Frank. I never really smiled. I look at pictures of Kelly and I've got a lovely smile now, you know.
And you worked with Lennox Lewis as well. What was he like? What was that like doing that?
That was I mean, if I'm honest, that my boxing career kept me going, you know, and it kept me on that. But people saw the person that was always out there making these comments, that was always up front, wearing that Union Jack suit. But no one saw the person that were away from that, would cry their eyes out at night, would be drinking, would be contemplating suicide, you know. And then the next morning I'd get up and I'd put on a suit, and it was fit like as I was going out on the stage and being an actor, because I knew I had to present this image. And you know, being around Lennox was good, because obviously he, you know, became the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. And I mean, my career, everyone judges me on Lennox, but my career wasn't all about Lennox. You know, I produced 5 other world champions, I produced a number of British champions, and I worked with a lot of fighters, and, you know, and I was quite proud of what I'd done, actually, in the boxing world. Obviously not proud of some of the statements I made, but that's life.
Well, there's ups and downs there. And I wanted to ask you this just because I was interested in what you might say to it. When Keir Starmer, because he made comments about it, and he said that when he was asked, does a woman have a penis, he didn't want to answer it. What is your view on all of that? Not the actual whether you support the Labour Party, not that sort of thing, but what's your view about how the politicians are handling this whole trans?
Well, I think we have to remember the trans umbrella is very big, and you know, I'm still learning. I grew up in a world where there was male, female, homosexuals or intersex, but now I do diversity speaking. I check. I mean, there's 59 genders that are recognised.
I think it's 76 now.
Is it 76? Oh, you've corrected me again. That's good.
Well, it's gone up. It was actually at that point.
And so many different sexualities. I honestly don't understand it. I think everyone has the right to live their life as long as they live by the rules and as long as they respect each other, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what box you're put in, we're all human beings, and that's the most important thing. And, you know, I'd like to see all the letters thrown out and just one letter, respect for each other.
But that would be good, wouldn't it? That's a lovely point to make. That if we just all respected each other, things would be fine. We don't need
so much better. We don't choose to. I didn't choose to transition. I had a great life, you know. I had a chauffeur. I travelled first class everywhere. Now I travel EasyJet.
Didn't you? Well, I mean, it makes sense, though, doesn't it? I mean, it doesn't.
I'm just saying, but you know, I mean, and I walked away from all that because I just could not be true to myself. You know, it's so hard, and I do feel, you know, I've met a number of trans people on their journey, who some have not made it. Unfortunately, they've taken their life. Some have made it. Some have made it, and they're not as happy as they should be. And it is so hard. And they find it hard because they fear rejection in society. They fear ridicule. They fear losing their job. They fear losing their family. We are still, in a way, we are still the same person. You know, I'm still dad to my 3 girls. I can't change that. I'll always be their dad, you know. I've just changed. I always say I've just changed the outside wrapping.
And then finally, I want to ask you, you said it's not a fantasy, so it wasn't obviously a fantasy, but does what you imagined as being a woman, does it match the reality?
Well, I'm much more comfortable in my skin. I'm a much happier person, so I have to say yes. And, you know, I've got a really nice social life now, and I've made some lovely friends, so... And I'm true to myself, that's the most important thing. I get up now in the morning, I look in the mirror, and I smile, and I'm happy, and I thank God for giving me a second chance in life.
Yeah. Well, it's been so good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to finally finish on what you're up to now. Is there anything specific you're doing?
There's a documentary coming out about my life sometime this year, and I've just signed to have a feature film made about my life with an American production company, Chad Vardy, who was one of the directors on The Irishman. And I'm doing a lot of diversity speaking, which I really enjoy. And other than that, I try to live a quiet life.
That's lovely, a quiet life. Everyone wants a quiet life. Kelly, thank you so much for coming into the studio. Thank you for joining me. That was, of course, Kelly Maloney. This is Outside. You're watching GB News on TV, online, and on British Radio. On British Radio? TV radio? It is British Radio. I don't know what I'm talking about. Listen, stay with me because we've got so much more to come in the next hour. I'll be asking, would you live next door to a wind farm? Boris Johnson's pushing energy companies to build a colossal wind farm in the Irish Sea within the next year. So, with the government's new energy plan set to increase offshore wind generation fivefold, and plans by Boris Johnson to increase onshore farms too, I want to ask if you'd be happy living next door to one of those. We'll be back in a moment.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
It's coming up to 27 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm still with my panel, co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albi Amankona, and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. And it is, of course, time for our Great British Debate this hour. So I'm asking, would you live next door to a wind farm? Now, it's reported that Boris Johnson's pushing energy companies to build a colossal wind farm in the Irish Sea within the next 12 months. Next week, the government's going to be releasing its energy security strategy, and it's expected to include an increase in offshore energy capacity from 11 gigawatts to 50. So Boris Johnson's also thought to be trying to increase wind farm capacity on land too. You can see here that since 1989, there's been a steady growth in the amount of power that we're generating in the UK through wind between 2009 and 2020. If you look there, you can see that if you look carefully, what colour line are we? Let's have a look. I think we are the blue line, it's in between. But we still hugely lag behind the likes of people like Germany and China and the United States. So I want to find out what the pros and cons of wind power are and ask if you'd be happy having a wind farm next door. So joining me to discuss this is an expert on energy sources, Angela Knight. She's also the former CEO of Energy UK. Right, so Angela, wind farms. I want to know, first of all, where can wind farms be? What are the propellers and things made of? And how much energy does one of those things generate?
Well, if you build them offshore, your wind farms offshore, then you are most likely to be able to produce the maximum amount of power out from them because the wind blows more regularly offshore. The disadvantage of offshore is that you're a long way from connecting to the grid. I know that you've shown some pictures of offshore wind farms, but actually having gone and had a look at them, they are not unattractive things at all. They don't look particularly obtrusive, but as I say, they are pretty expensive to build. You've got to drill down into the seabed and you've got to build that connection to the grid. As to how much does each of them produce, well, it depends upon the size. But I suppose in broad terms, you need quite a lot of those turbines to produce a relatively small amount of electricity, which is why we're building quite so many wind farms in order to provide us with some, well, as much as possible as we can of renewable electricity in that form. If you bring your wind farm onshore, well, first of all, it's cheaper to build because, you know, you can get it into the ground much more easily and you're closer to the grid. But the issue here is people. And if you're going to build onshore wind farms, then what you need to do is you need to find somewhere which, again, is sufficiently exposed. So you're going to catch as much wind as possible, but if possible is as far away from people's homes, as people do find them rather intrusive. As you rightly say, not many people want to live next door to one of those, but if it's a reasonable distance away, then it's a different kettle of fish.
Impact then if you have, say, one in the sea to the environment around you and one on land to the environment around you, so the actual ecosystem, how damaging is it?
How damaging in what respect? To build it?
Well, if you're putting
to the environment generally?
Yeah, the environment, does it damage, you know, because it must use a lot of land underneath it and you know, it must damage the seabed, surely.
There's been some concerns and there's been quite a lot of studies. One of the main concerns actually was not directly environmental. It was whether the wind farm would interfere with radar, you know, that ships use. And I think they've more or less solved that one. On the environmental, the studies that I've seen did very intensive environmental investigation on plankton, on fish, on, as you rightly say, what you're doing to the seabed. But I think we've got to recognise, like anything to do with industry, it's not free of environmental impact. You can minimise your environmental impact. You can choose your location appropriately, but these will have an environmental impact. Energy is expensive to build whatever it is that you need to build to produce it. It's expensive for nuclear, it's expensive for wind, it's expensive for solar. It's quite intrusive because these are big installations, again, whether they're wind or whether they're nuclear, but we do need energy. We are a society and economy that requires electricity. And that means that governments have not got to just make short-term decisions, but have got to make long-term decisions. And whilst I'm entirely in favour of doing what we can by using renewables, we also have to recognise that reliable backup is essential as well. You can't do one without the other.
Right, and your backup would be what? Fossil fuel?
Well, again, you've got some choices. You can have fossil fuel backup, of which gas is the least polluting, and you can have nuclear backup, which is less polluting, of course, because it's not hydrocarbons. It's less polluting than gas. It's more expensive to build. I suspect the government is going to back the small-scale nuclear power reactors of the sort that I gather that Elon Musk has got some interest in this, and of course Rolls-Royce has been doing a lot of research on, and Rolls-Royce makes small nuclear reactors anyway. I don't mean, for other uses. And the thing about that...
I just want to ask you one last question very briefly, because we're coming up to the news. And what about the storage of the energy from wind farms? Does it make a lot of energy, and is it easy to store?
No, electricity is not easy to store in any way. You can store some of it in batteries, but that's relatively short term. One of the longer term ideas is that you use the surplus power, when we're not switching our lights on, but the wind is still blowing, to electrolyze water, produce hydrogen, and then you put hydrogen to replace some of the gas in the gas grid, or something along those lines. The technology isn't there. The ideas are good. The only way that you can actually deal with your renewables is by, build more renewables by all means, but by having that backup as well. Gas for the interim, nuclear for the long term, I think is the best way.
Thank you so much, Angela. That's Angela Knight. She's the former CEO of Energy UK. Right, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue our Great British debate, and I'm asking, would you live next door to a wind farm? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Albi Amankona and Calvin Robinson. But first, let's get your latest news headlines. Thank you. It's 5:33. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has condemned Russia for what he's calling despicable attacks against Ukrainian civilians in Bucha and Irpin. Boris Johnson added, "We will not rest until justice is served." It's after Ukraine's foreign minister accused Russia of carrying out a deliberate massacre in the town of Bucha outside Kiev. Dmytro Kuleba also is calling on G7 leaders to impose new sanctions on Moscow. Russia's pullback of troops from Ukraine's capital is not a real withdrawal. That's according to NATO's Secretary-General. Speaking to CNN, Jens Stoltenberg warned Moscow could be repositioning forces for further attacks. President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's now strengthening Ukraine's defences in the east of the country. Plumes of smoke were seen over the southern city of Odessa after Russia's defence ministry claimed strikes have destroyed an oil refinery and 3 fuel depots. Conservative MP David Warburton has reportedly been admitted to a psychiatric hospital with severe shock and stress. It's pending an investigation into allegations of his conduct. The Somerton and Frome MP had the Tory whip withdrawn yesterday. Mr Warburton is said to deny any wrongdoing. At least 6 people have been killed and 10 others injured after a shooting in the US state of California. Police have closed off several streets in the city of Sacramento as they investigate. It comes just over a month after a man shot and killed himself, his 3 children and another person at a church in the city. And a new treatment for liver cancer, which isolates the organ and protects other parts of the body, has been found to be effective in nearly 90% of patients. The procedure involves diverting blood past the liver while delivering drugs into the organ and is being pioneered by experts at the University Hospital, Southampton. Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. We'll be back to Nana Akua in just a moment.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
So it's coming up to 39 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and we return to our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, would you live next door to a wind farm? Boris Johnson's reportedly pushing for a colossal wind farm to be built in the Irish Sea within the next 12 months. Now, it's part of the government's energy security strategy, which is set to be published next week. The plans are expected to include an increase in offshore energy capacity from 11 gigawatts to 50, and there's been consistent growth in the amount of power that we are generating in the UK through wind since 1989. There's a little graph there that shows you can just see us. I think we're in the green bit there, I think, actually. I said blue before, but I think we are the green. Oh, we're orange, actually, I lie. We're actually orange. I don't know why I thought green. But if you have a look there, so between 2009 and 2020, it's increased by 715%. But we are lagging behind countries like Germany and China and the United States, to name but a few of them. But yes, United Kingdom there. We're increasing our capacity nonetheless. So with wind power set to expand even more, I want to know whether you're happy if perhaps a wind farm was next door. But before I speak to my panel, let's have a quick look at what you've already been saying. Dave said horrendously ugly things. Every single hillside for 360 degrees where I live is full of them. Huge footprint, minimal efficacy for area. And he says, we would hate to live next door to a wind farm. Noise and terrible blot on the landscape, also taking up valuable space for growing more food for our country and devastating to our wildlife. Richard said the only people who object to these are the snobs. With all the land, I couldn't care less if I had one in my neighbourhood. Really? Well, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind as long as, things couldn't get trapped in the propellers, if people were walking by and stuff. That's what worries me. I think of Windy Miller when I see them. Do you remember Windy Miller? Let's see what my panel, they won't remember. They're too young. Let's see what my panel will make of that. I'm joined by Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albie Amankona. Do you remember Windy Miller?
I don't know who Windy Miller is.
Blank faces. He's a cartoon character that lived in a windmill. Yeah, I think sometimes he would be on the sails and the sails would move. But anyway, I digress. So what's your view, Calvin, on wind farms?
I think they're ugly. I think they're dangerous to wildlife. We've got such beautiful greenery in this country, such beautiful countryside. To ruin it with these great big metal propellers everywhere that are completely inefficient anyway, it doesn't make much sense to me. I think they operate for a week of the year, and that's when they get 90% of their energy. In fact, it's less than that. It's like 17 hours a year is when they get 90% of their energy. So,
really?
So they're completely pointless. I do think we need to increase our energy production in-house in this country, but are these really the way to go?
But what about offshore? So it's not in the garden or wherever?
Sure. I mean, if it's offshore, then there's no noise pollution pollution, there's no site pollution, and it's less of a threat to wildlife. So if it's offshore, fine. But would I want to live next to one of these? Absolutely not.
Because Boris Johnson's pushing for a lot of offshore ones.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a better idea than next door.
But they cost a bomb as well. The trade-off just isn't there. I don't understand why we're going down this route.
What do you think, Albie?
I would live next to a wind turbine. I've not personally got a problem with them. I've always thought they looked quite beautiful, actually. I remember being quite taken by them.
Come on, Albie.
Honestly, I did. I remember being quite taken by them the first time I saw one when I went on my German exchange when I was 11, because they had lots of them before we did. Look, I think when we're thinking about energy, we've got to be thinking about a mixed energy policy that includes nuclear, that includes natural gas, that also includes renewables. We've got to have an honest conversation about that. People are unhappy when we build power stations anywhere. If it was a nuclear power station, people would complain. If it was a wind turbine, people would complain. If it was a gas-fired power station, people would complain. We all need power. As Energy said, it's fundamental to everything in our lives at the moment.
What about next door to a nuclear power station? How do you feel about that?
Yes, I would live next door to a nuclear power station. I'm a YIMBY, Nana. Yes, in my backyard.
All right, let's build it in Albie's backyard then.
What about you, Calvin? Would you live next door to a nuclear...
No, I think a nuclear power station should be far away from residential areas. It doesn't need to be close to where people are living. There's plenty of room up in the north that isn't being occupied.
In the north?
Yeah, of the landmass, so way up north of Scotland where people aren't living.
Yeah. I think looking at it, I don't really mind a wind farm. I think they look quite good. I think they look quite beautiful. But
Am I mad?
actually
You
agree.
two both think these are beautiful.
Yes,
but I do. But I don't want them on land.
Right.
If they're going to be anywhere, I agree with Boris Johnson that they should be offshore, because I think that's a better idea. And they're fully exposed to the elements there, and whilst they'll probably be at risk of catching seagulls and potentially they'll damage the ecosystem, we have to have something. And
but no,
I
they
think
don't work. When it's windy, they turn them off. I've never understood that, because they don't want them to go too fast. They don't work.
I think it's when it's too windy they turn them off so they don't get damaged. I think what was one of the most interesting things for me in this story in the Telegraph, where they speak about how Boris Johnson wants to build this colossal wind farm out in the Irish Sea and also more on land.
Yeah.
Is that apparently it takes about 24 hours to put one of these turbines up, but the planning can take up to 10 years. And when Boris Johnson got elected, when this Conservative government got elected, they said they were going to cut red tape.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me that some serious planning red tape needs to be cut so we can meet this target, not just for wind energy or indeed energy independence, by the way, but also for housing.
But wasn't he saying that we can do that? We did the vaccine rollouts and we, got the vaccine done in a year. Surely we can do this quickly. I think that's what he was saying. So I think he's on the side of expediency and getting it done quickly. But I think, once again, we do need to have a real think about how much they will, add to the whole strategy, the overall picture. Because as I spoke to Angela, she said that they can't really store much energy at all. It's very difficult to store electricity. So, it sort of begs the question, how efficient, how effective will they be?
I don't like to see our countryside ruined like that. So do you guys think the solar powers are beautiful too?
No, I don't like that. But I think people could potentially have I don't see why you can't have solar panels on your house and things like that.
But we saw a minute ago, like the green countryside with all these metal and glass panels everywhere. It ruins it, doesn't it?
Well, that's not necessary. I think we could do that differently.
Also, I think as well, people would have said the same thing about pylons when they were first going up. Pylons are ugly, but we need pylons for power, right? I don't think anyone's ever going to be happy with huge pieces of metal infrastructure going up, but they do want electricity and affordable electricity.
So let's get fracking, Albie.
Yes, I agree, we should get fracking.
No, but then
I've always
don't
been a
forget the
supporter
water
of it.
table.
We need a mixed energy policy, Calvin, which is what I said before.
Yeah.
It includes fracking, it includes renewables, and it includes nuclear.
But don't forget, fracking isn't... it does sound like a wonderful idea, but there are elements to it that are quite detrimental to the environment.
Well, there are to all of these.
So, for example...
Exactly.
But this is a big one. So, for example, the water that's pushed down the whole shaft for the energy to be released, that becomes contaminated and can contaminate the water table. So we have to look at that. That's a huge thing. I'm just going to happily quickly have a chat with our GB voice, though, because as ever, this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome one of our great British voices. This is your opportunity to be on the show to tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. Rhodri Williams is from Wales and is campaigning against a possible wind farm being built by his home. So, Rhodri, well, talk to me about this, and why don't you want that wind farm next door?
Yes, I'm not a NIMBY, before anybody says that. We've got 198 wind turbines in this area in South Wales. So for anyone to say, oh, he's a NIMBY, is ridiculous. We've got more than enough in this area, but we're totally against this development because of the size of the turbines These turbines are going to be from 205 to 250 meters high. That's over 800 feet high. That's the equivalent to the size of the Shard or the Eiffel Tower. And they're going to be on top of a mountain range as well. So you can imagine the visual impact that's going to have on thousands of people in the surrounding villages. These turbines are designed for offshore. So the fact that they want to put them onshore, which will be one of the tallest onshore wind farms in the UK, if not the world, I think, 250 meters high. It's frankly disgraceful, really. It's a cheek that they think they can get away with this. So we're going to fight this right till the end, because they're destroying a beautiful area. I mean, I can talk about the reasons why we're against it, but mainly because of the
Give me one reason. Give me your main reason. Give me your main reason, apart from the visual impact. What is the main reason why you're against them?
The main reasons, it's hard to pick one. I mean, the health impacts that we've read about are potentially huge. The pulsating low-frequency drones that come from these turbines can have a huge effect. They can cause headaches, anxiety, sleep deprivation. We've read of some families actually being forced to sell their homes because of these type of things happening. And where we live, it's it's in a valley, so it's going to act as an echo basin. So it's going to amplify these infrared sounds as well. We've got plenty of them coming from the steelworks in Port Talbot, so we don't need any more negative health impacts in this area that can be.
So Rodri, so would you support offshore ones though? A yes or no?
Yes, but I mean, I'm a bit of a hypocrite for saying that, but certainly they should be offshore, out of the way of people. There are question marks about. I mean, we've learned a lot about turbines since we've told about the development, and they're not green, they're not clean, and there's alternative. We're not against green energy, we're not against renewable energy. We're surrounded by water here. They need to look at the tidal lagoon in Swansea. So yeah, there's lots of alternatives. So.
Wonderful. Well, listen, Rodri, you've been very eloquent. It's good to talk to you. That's Rodri Williams. He's there in Wales. He's one of our GB voices, and also he's a campaigner for Stop. I'm not going to say Ebrin. Have I got that right? Wind farm group. I wish I'd stopped myself there. I could have just left that. Let's see what my panel think of that. So that was Rodri. He was kind of saying what you're saying, Calvin. They're pretty ugly. They're an eyesore, and actually they're potentially damaging to health. I don't know if any of that is proven. It's just is what he's just said. I've never heard of that.
But it comes down to efficiency, doesn't it? I do agree with Albie, we need a mixed economy approach, but let's look at the factors that work best. And I think nuclear and fracking would yield much better results than renewables. Renewables is all about looking good. It's all about this net zero green climate change nonsense that most people don't buy into anyway. So I think let's drop the things if they don't work, and let's go with the best approach.
Final word for you briefly, Albie.
Yes, I think we should be going with the best approach, but that approach does include renewables, and we need a mixed energy economy in this country, and the share of fossil fuels should come down. Renewables and nuclear should go up.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Well, today I've also been asking you at home, would you live next door to a wind farm? And let's see what you've been saying. Stig says, well, no, obviously. They only site them where it's windy. Why would choose to live where it's windy most of the time, unless you have your own wind turbine in the garden? Teresa says, have them here in Scotland, where we were told they would be out of sight. They have destroyed any landscapes that encourages tourism, and we have not seen any reduction in energy prices. That is the point, isn't it? Only people gaining again is shareholders. She makes a very good point. The energy prices appear to still be staying high, but I think they're expensive as well. David says, well, probably not. Well, probably not, as I live in the city. But if I didn't, why not? I'd prefer to live next to some windmills than an ugly coal power station, or worse, worried sick it might melt down one day. Well, it could fall down, actually, by the way, just so you know, David. And Stephen says to all those who think wind farms are OK, go live near one. They are a blot on the landscape. I stayed in a hotel a few miles from a wind farm in Cornwall. The droning was awful. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, and do you know what? I hear the government have been taking that levy for green energy for many, many years. So by now, they should have loads of money and should be able to afford to build them. But it's now time for Supplement Sunday. That's the part of the show where we discuss some of the other stories making the headlines today. And I want to start with this one in The Sun. Right, so it's compiled a list of things that make you a certified commoner. So let's see if any of these apply to my panel as well. And of course, please play along at home. Right, so the first one. Do you have a simple doorbell, or do you fancy or a chiming sound?
Just a simple doorbell that goes ring.
A simple doorbell that goes ring. What about you, Albie?
I didn't know what the fancy chiming sound sounds like, but I think it's just an ordinary doorbell. It's not a particularly fancy one.
Not like a ring or anything.
Not like a ring doorbell. Well, I did have some notes here that would tell you, but I can tell you now that if you have a chiming doorbell, then you're a commoner. So you answered that. If you said you've got a chiming doorbell, then that's a pretty common thing. Right, OK, second question. This is going well. Do you call the room your TV is in the living room, or do you call it the sitting room?
The sitting room.
Living room.
So you call it the sitting room, you call it the living room? Right, well, you're a commoner, Albie, you are posh. The sitting room. Right, best of three, let's see. OK, right. What did you say? Did you say the sitting room? Did you? That makes you posh, actually. OK, 3. Is the water in your toilet blue?
No, it's clear.
Yeah, same.
So you don't have one of those little things that sit on the side to make
No.
Well, it turns out, no, don't be silly, I'd be common then.
There's nothing wrong with being common.
No,
but apparently if you did, then you're apparently... This is just a thing.
We're all commoners here.
We are, really. I can remember one time I was at school, and it's so funny, there was this very, very posh girl, and her name was Sarah, and she was going on, oh, my name's so posh, and she was going on and on and on and on and on. And then she goes, so many people got my name. And I remember another girl who never says anything ever, it's always very polite. She went, not posh, Sarah, more common. I laughed. Oh, how we laughed. But there's nothing wrong with the name Sarah. And I can tell you now that Nana is one of the most common names in Ghana.
Is it?
And not only women are called it, but men are.
It's one of my middle names, actually.
His middle name.
So there we go.
And if somebody says Nana, literally everybody turns around.
Like standing in the middle of Pakistan and just shouting Mohammed. I'd love to do that one day.
Well, what did you score? Are you posh or common according to The Sun? Well, next, it's Albie with the story on prenups.
Yeah, this is an interesting story. It's about Brooklyn Beckham, of course, David and Victoria's son, who is engaged to a woman called Nicola Peltz, who's an actress. And one of them, I think Nicola is 27 and Brooklyn is 23, and they're getting married and they want to sign a prenup. And I guess this whole story is about wondering, is it right to sign a prenup? And I think I'm a little bit of a hopeless romantic when it comes to prenups. I sort of think that if you sign a prenup, then it's kind of an admission of failure that your marriage might break down.
Yeah.
Now, a sensible person might say, with 42% of British marriages ending in divorce, maybe it's prudent to do a prenup. But I like to think I've got more confidence in my love choices than that.
Do you think? I think do the prenup. What do you think?
I'm with Albie on this one. I think that if you're getting married, it should be for life. I don't think you should put in an emergency clause just in case it breaks down. You should be hoping and planning for it to work forever.
Yeah, but
I don't believe in divorce.
That's all very well, but I'm absolutely having a prenup. Depends if they've got more than me, to be honest. If they've got more than me, then I'm quite happy to just let it go.
But you're combining into one. You're not keeping your own and looking after your own interests. You're becoming one entity.
Whatever you say, Calvin. I don't think so.
This is why marriages are going down in this country, because we don't believe in them anymore.
You also notice that I'm not married. I've never been married. Nobody wants me. But
I don't believe that at all.
Tweet at GBNews if you want Nana Akua.
Right, so on today's show, there'll be nothing coming through. We've been asking, has Rishi Sunak's spring statement affected your vote? And according to our Twitter poll, 44% of you say yes, 56% of you say no, it wouldn't change your vote at all. Has it changed your vote, yes or no? Say yes or no, Calvin.
I don't know.
Yours?
No.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you so much to my panel, co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albie Ammon-Kona, and also Conservative commentator Calvin Robertson for joining me. And thank you to you at home for your company. I'll be back next week on Friday on 4. I'll leave you with the weather. Enjoy.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry with sunny spells for most, but rain edging in from the northwest. Let's take a look at those details. The southwest will end the day mostly dry with plenty of sunny spells on offer. The odd isolated light shower is possible, but it will be a fine evening for most. It will also be a fine and dry Sunday evening for the southeast. There'll be some fair weather cloud and plenty of sunny spells. Sunny spells will be plentiful across South Wales this evening too. Winds will be mainly light and there'll be a little fair weather cloud. There'll also be a little more cloud across the Midlands, but there'll also be some bright or sunny spells. An isolated light shower is possible, but for most it will remain dry. It's a different story across north-east England, where cloud will be increasing as rain gradually edges in from the north. The winds will also start to increase here through the evening. The wet weather will already be in place across southern Scotland this evening. The rain will be patchy in nature and turn heavy at times, with strong gusty winds too. Northern Ireland will also be cloudy, with patchy outbreaks of rain edging southeastwards through the evening. The winds will also be strengthening here, especially around coastal areas where gales are possible. The cloud, rain and strengthening winds will continue to edge steadily southeast overnight, reaching all areas by the morning. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.